I want to thank everyone for coming today. I look forward to this meeting every year. I want to hear from the principals and the central staff and get an idea for their wish list and stuff. And I don't recall ever at this meeting having the town administrator here, so I want to thank you for coming to this meeting today. I didn't expect you. It's a pleasant surprise.
I appreciate you inviting me.
You were invited.
And I think we're going to start with Ms. Shaver-Hood, Dr. Shaver-Hood, sorry.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. Really, our process is just to share with you information. Our principals and directors will be coming in, going through their budget. If you have questions, please ask questions. This is our draft. This is not our final budget. We'll continue to work through the budget process as we receive directions from the school committee and, of course, the town. We thank you to the principals and directors, and also a special thank you to Mr. McMillan. There's been a lot of work put in, and I think that you will find a quality product at the end of today. And as well, if you could go a little easy on Mr. McMillan, his laptop crashed this morning, and so we have been scrambling to get a new one over. We think we have it, though. Okay.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Just before we start, I just thought I'd outline the process we've gone through, which is, and what I've asked, or what we've worked with the principals and the directors to do, is present essentially 3 different budgets, or 3 different scenarios. The first is a level service budget, by which I mean a budget whereby we provide the same level of service next year as this year. That still requires an increment because due to salary increases and changing demands from the state in terms of compliance to meet our students' needs. So that's still an increase, but it's just providing a very simple level service from what we've provided today. We've then looked at what would require minimum school improvement. So what principals and directors would need to just take the schools to improve on, to do better than we did this year. What financial assistance could provide that, and then a significant school improvement scenario. So there's 3 scenarios, and really partly we're presenting that because we want you and the community to understand the choices and the decisions that we're making here and how the budget relates directly back to the curriculum and the performance of our schools and how we serve our students. So we wanted you to help you understand, and we wanted to get your advice on how, the priorities and how we're looking to take our schools forward next year. So all that said, it might get a little confusing as we look at people's slides where you're seeing different options, but that's the kind of general structure we're looking at. Level service, a minimum school improvement, significant school improvement.
Go ahead, Jeff.
It's probably worth mentioning that as we are doing this, the state is holding hearings on Chapter 70. And the hearings have already demonstrated what perhaps everybody in this room thought was true, which was that the basic assumptions of Chapter 70 as to what percentage of our budget, and we are spending on each category that has a formula in it for Chapter 70 is simply not accurate. In other words, they assumed we'd be spending a certain amount on teacher salaries. They would be spending a certain amount on curriculum and textbooks and all those various things. All those assumptions, with the exception of 2, turn out to be wrong. They're all lower than anticipated based on the formula that was established in the early 90s. And we are spending far more on special education and healthcare than was anticipated. So the problem that we're having is being recognized by the state. What they choose to do about it remains to be seen. But literally, hearings are going on right now all across the state on Chapter 70, which represents I don't know, 12 million, Derek, 13 million, that's the order of magnitude. And the reality, it should probably be at least $1 million a year more.
Thank you. So there's packs being printed as we speak of papers for you, which will provide an overview of the entire budget by district, by school, or by cost centre, a list of our staffing, and then the slides for each presenter, as well as a short table of the discretionary account lines that they control. It'll all make sense when you see it. So that's my spiel. Does anybody have any questions before we start with the first presentation? The last thing I will say, is just that I have asked the principals to focus on the level service and the minimum school improvement budget, because I know we're short of time, and while we will cover and share with you the significant improvements, we wanted to focus on what was realistic. All right, so over to Scott.
So I'll go through the PowerPoint first, and I'll try and I think you all know about the profile, so I'll try and pass through some of the slides and try to keep you on time today, starting off first. But if I can, on the next slide, just talk about some of our improvements that we really want to focus on at the high school. The creation of curriculum committees. I know it's been talked about at school committee meetings, but we really need time, especially with the Common Core, to have time to make sure our curriculums are aligned in both ELA and in math. So for literacy, we're looking at some point to create a curriculum committee, creation of common assessments, and then obviously once that is done, to train the staff and give them a crosswalk on the new curriculum changes. We also have placed a tremendous amount of emphasis on our higher end students that are enrolled in AP and pre-AP, and to make sure we have training for our staff. So those are the literacy pillar improvement plans. From a mathematics pillar, we're looking at the creation of the math curriculum committee. Again, once you create the committee and you revise the curriculum, we do need to make sure we train the staff on the changes. And we want to utilize, we purchased last year was the first year we had new textbooks in the math department, and we hadn't had textbooks in many years in the department. And there's also an online component that was part of the contract that was signed. We want to make sure we're maintaining the training that goes along with that free online support. And again, AP and pre-AP training for math as well. From a technology standpoint, we want to look at having 100% wireless in the building. The park assessment is going to be, we're going to start with that this year, which is 100% online for all freshmen and juniors. And we're going to need to make sure we have 100% wireless as this comes into play and as it starts to count. Right now, we're in a hold harmless situation in regards to the test, but in a few years, that's going to be off the table. Because it's online, we do want to purchase 4 more Chromebook carts, and we're hoping the district will support that with their budget. Train the staff on the new technology. As you're bringing in technology, you've got to train some of the folks that didn't grow up with technology as part of their life. Safe and secure schools. From that pillar, we want to replace some security cameras. Our security system is coming up on 10 years of age, and unfortunately there are some cameras that are dying and aren't producing a great picture. So we need to start replacing some of those. We also had some issues over the summer with vandalism, and most recently, there were some other schools and other town properties that had some issues. We want to make sure that we're protecting our perimeter, both during school times and after school times. The last thing we want to do from a technology standpoint is add a proximity scanner to the back door and the loading dock doors, so we can make sure that we know who's coming in and when. And if someone loses their card, we can disable that card, and it's a lot easier than trying to track down keys. So those are the 4 pillars we're looking to improve upon. I won't bore you with the data, but this is the data that we look at: MCAS, AP, SAT, CPI, growth, accountability level, and I'll pass through since we've already presented the MCAS at a school committee meeting. I won't bore you there.
Can I just ask, are there any questions from our guests regarding MCAS data? past MCAS data, or is it important for you all to review it? Okay.
I mean, just to point out, that we've asked all the principals and directors to include that information because we're trying to make it really clear the link between our budget and our educational priorities. So that's why we're trying to use the MCAS data to identify what the priorities are for the school and support the decisions that we're making with the budget. Because it comes back to, I think, we've heard on the school committee, if your budget is educate priorities in action. So that's why we're trying to keep that link as close as possible.
The MCAS data is one tool. Obviously, there's a lot of other data that's out there. I'd be glad to go back if you want. Okay.
But I do want to ask the chair how he wants to handle questions.
Well, I was going to wait for it to be done. Are you done, or do you think we should have questions now?
It's up to you.
It's a good break right now.
Okay, so, yeah, we'll do questions right now. Anyone? Mr.
Yes.
Sutton?
Two questions. One is... Two questions. One is, whenever I see the formation of a new committee, I wonder, was that, the absence of that committee really preventing something from happening? We've had department heads for years. There's no fundamental reason why a department head couldn't have gotten together with their teachers and say, let's make sure we're aligned, let's make sure we are doing things that are going to make sure that the curriculum is working for all students. What is the real significance of the formation of these committees?
Sure. Oh, well, first of all, you're getting input from the folks that are in the trenches, and that can't happen organically during the school day. Our teachers a few years ago stepped up and added an extra class to their roles, and it really got rid of any, not that we had common planning time, but any extra time to have those type of meetings. Our time that we have after school, because we had them add an extra teaching period, we lost some time after school as we negotiated that. So it's difficult to get all the people at the right time and to have input from everyone that's in the trenches.
But we have in-service days periodically, right? Half days.
When you look at contractually what's required for those days, there's really, there's not a lot of days. And
so what you're saying is this has been necessary for years.
it has been necessary, and especially now with the push to the Common Core.
Second question is, when I think about security, I think about what is the weakest link? And I have to confess something. I held the door open the other day, and as I did it, I thought, oh, geez, I had a chance to be safer or rude. And I chose not to be rude, I should say. Is that the weakest link, what I just did?
Probably not. I think, we've got cameras, and we have security, a security receptionist who's on that job, so I was already told about it, so don't worry. But but no, I don't think that, to answer your question, no, that's not the weakest link.
What do you think the weakest link is in the security?
The weakest link in the security is probably the 40-some-odd doors that we have that exit out of the building. And I can guarantee you it's not the front one that we have 2 cameras on, so you're okay. But I think that's the weakest link, and we're trying to, this has been I've been involved in it for 10 years now, building up the security cameras, a few cameras a year. And, it's good that we're at the point in time now where we're having to replace cameras that are 10 or 11 years of age. But it's also bad because now we have to take that money and replace the camera that we already had in place instead of adding another one. But I think the weakest link is, I would argue, with the doors that you probably can't see when you're walking through the halls.
And what are we doing about that?
So we're trying to put a camera on every exterior door.
But the camera won't prevent someone from getting in.
True. We conduct drills. We had 2 undercover police officers try and penetrate the building at various points in time. Happy to report that on the first try, the cafeteria worker saw him trying to come through the loading dock door and called the office and sent him on his way. The second time, we snuck him in the back door, and the security receptionist secretary caught him coming through the back door and told him he had to come around front. And the third time, we actually were able to, when the secretary was on break, we snuck him in, and he only made it up the back stairwell. So we do routine tests to test our security. We're pretty confident, but we're never satisfied.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bugan.
Thank you. So one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation had to do with training, especially around technology and training for technology to get the folks that haven't grown up with technology up to speed. So the question that I have is that in the world that we are in now, there are so many different online trainings that could actually be rolled out now, and asking teachers that feel uncomfortable to be able to take them at their leisure, or, you know, trying to find time during the day or even at home, just basic things, so then when you're ready to roll out a piece of technology, they already have that basic piece there. Are we doing, instead of waiting, this is the technology, now training, are we doing ongoing training, or at least promotion of different kinds of links and online trainings for our teachers, so then there's that ramp up before all of a sudden you're trying to struggle to roll out a new technology?
Right. What we're doing is that it's department head driven, and what they've done is they've actually temporarily taken apart a cart and given the teachers the technology to use at their leisure. They take it home, and our philosophy is if they become familiar with it, comfortable with it, they're going to be more willing to implement technology apps in this case, because we gave them some iPads to take home and just to kind of get familiar with. So it's happening. It's department head driven, which is great, because all my department heads are technologically very savvy, and it's happening kind of organically. But what we would like to do is actually to potentially, the in-service time unfortunately is all used up for this year, but potentially for the next year, through this budget, to have some training where we actually infuse some of the technology training. Webinars, obviously, they can do on their own, just to try and get this thing organized and have some of that training.
Yeah, and I think that is the point, not to wait for in-service days, but being able to put together a, how-to guide online that at any time they could go and say, all right, I need to know more about Excel, and click on that in their webinars. There are just so many free trainings out there. Just being able to provide an easy access way for them to dive in beforehand on their own would be great.
Definitely. And I mean, we're in a good place. We infuse quite a bit of technology in the high school, and if you could measure it, I'm sure we're 300% above where we were last year. But again, we're trying to, with Park and getting more into the 21st century, bringing in more technology into the high school. These are the kids that are going on, and they're going to need to, whether it be in the workforce or in college, they're going to need to be able to utilize this. So we're excited with where we are right now, but certainly, we don't want to settle. We want to continue to improve and provide a better product for our students.
Mel, do you have anything? I just wanted to say the books. Literally last year.
Can you talk to the microphone?
Yeah. Literally last year, like no math books, and you were copying things. Now we've got them, but I don't want to fall behind. I don't want to be in that situation again. How are we looking as far as that goes? Not just math, but with whatever you need for books.
So one of the areas of emphasis, what I'm going to try and do moving forward is, since there isn't a textbook line item, I'm going to try and every year try and improve the standings of where we're at, and I hope to at some point in time go digital and not have to purchase the textbooks, because obviously it's very cost prohibitive when you're paying for a physical textbook versus getting the rights and getting it through a digital format. So this year, as you'll see towards the end of the presentation, I'm looking at history. It's been neglected for many years. It's now the oldest textbook. One of my teachers joked that the textbook is older than she is, and she was accurate.
Oh, no.
So so we do have to ramp up our textbook line item, or recreate the line item. You'll see it's in another line item here as I get into my presentation.
I'm sure a lot of maps were redrawn in that time.
A lot of things have changed.
So, okay. All right. Moving on then.
Okay. So when we're looking at level service, and we mentioned in the presentation one of the pillars, safe and secure schools, we're looking at security cameras repair and installation. This would be a combination of approximately replacing, I believe there are 4 cameras that need to be replaced, and then hopefully adding in another 4 to some of those spots that we talked about when Mr. Sweat posed the question about my concern with the exterior doors. So that is on the level service. Minimal school improvement, I talked about the proximity scanner. I think for the head custodian, one of the toughest assignments is keeping track of who has what key and who has retired and who hasn't, and making sure we have the keys. It seems very easy, but through the scanning system, we have, first of all, we have a lot of staff that like to come in early. And our secretaries contractually don't work until 7 o'clock. This scanner has allowed for the teachers to come in early and work early and not have to put a burden on having a secretary who may show up early having to start work before 7 o'clock. So that's worked out really well. And having it on the back of the loading dock certainly allows us to know who's in the building at all times. We can run a report. If for some reason there was an issue, I can tell you who's in the building at what time, whatever day, going back for 30 some odd days. So it's a really great system. Right now we have it on the front of the building and on the gymnasium, and now we're just trying to move to the next two most often used doors in the building, which is the loading dock and the back door. So that would be a minimal school improvement, significant. I'm not, it doesn't seem to me that it would be pie in the sky that we should be revamping curriculums, but it is significant when we look at the 3 levels, and it's looking at the literacy and the math curriculum committees. And we do want to keep it small. It's not, we want to have a good cross-section of people from those departments, but what we found is when you keep it manageable, more work is done, it's more cost-effective, so that's kind of what we're looking at there. Please.
All right. On those committees, the $3,000, are those all stipends?
That would be a stipend, correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Whiteside.
I'm not sure I understand why you would create a new committee when your department heads, at least in my experience, which of course is dinosaurial.
Wasn't that long ago.
That's what the department heads and the departments did. Particularly in my department, we were constantly revamping and trying to stay one step ahead of you, God, and the state.
Appreciate that association.
And we managed.
And
it was, it was stay after time. It was earlier in the morning time. It was what we did.
I think back then there were more opportunities for these meetings to occur within the confines of the contract. As the contract has changed over time, as raises haven't been given out, those days and those hours have been cut back substantially. When you were working, teachers stayed after on Wednesdays. They don't do that now. When you were working, we had 185 days, and then there were some years where we had 185 days plus 7 in-service days. Unfortunately, through creative negotiations, I assume, some of those days have been taken away. I know, yeah, the negotiator over there. Some of those days were taken away, and all the Wednesdays were removed. So the time to allow that to happen organically during the day has been diminished over the years. And to get a good cross section and to get this done, it's very difficult. As I know, 20 minutes here, 30 minutes here, 15 minutes here. By the time you get back to where you were when you last left that meeting, it's tough to make progress. So by having a committee, you establish 2-hour, 3-hour meeting times where you have a captive audience and there's no one paging Mrs. Whiteside because a parent's there to pick up some homework. You find a time that's optimal where they can actually work. As you know, when we started in the summertime, the parking lot was packed with teachers. There was a ton of curriculum work being done. And unfortunately, because of the budget, those summer work days are not there anymore. So we really need to, I believe, bring this up to speed and get some help from the people that are in the trenches.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr.
just a
Swett.
quick question, and thank you for this, Michael. What's TEC, teacher?
Technology.
No, there's a separate technology line.
Michael, can I have?
Yeah.
Near the bottom of the list.
I believe it may have been the.
Yeah, I understand.
It could be in the business department. Let me. Mr. Swett, what page are you on? Are you on the first page?
Top page.
Okay. And
It's right above technology.
okay.
And you don't have a technology person, so I'm just wondering whether it's...
I believe that's listed at mine. It
Yeah,
is. Is it?
that's what I'm reading. Is that on the minute?
It isn't minor. The technology teacher that is like above technology 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, mine it has, oh, I'm sorry, the line, I didn't go across the line.
I thought I gained a position.
I'm still looking. I guess my eyes aren't working.
Well,
No, it's at the high school.
The TEC's at the
TEC is at the high school. My eyes are accurate.
I believe that that is one of our business teachers, but I would certainly want to.
But you're
Go-
not sure what the acronym means. Who created the acronym?
I found it somewhere. I don't know. I was on a list that we started with. I can tell you who it is actually.
If you tell me who it is, I can tell you. I believe it's probably someone in the business department.
It is David Arnold.
Oh, in the business department, but he is one of our vocational education teachers, and he teaches woodshop, plastic, and engineering. Or
So we still don't know what TEC stands. TEC.
technology education, I believe.
Yeah. But we can.
Okay,
I assume it's probably based on a certification.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So,
Anyone else? Okay.
well, since you probably can't see that, and since Michael gave us a great list, and you can look from the third to the right on the columns, that is our staffing list. And I did create a slide, and I apologize. It's very tough to see on the LCD, but certainly would entertain any questions you have on staffing.
Just
I have one general question.
Please.
You took the total population in students. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. If you took the total population at the high school 5 years ago in terms of students, and you
Right.
took the total population today, there's been a decline of whatever percentage. What decline in the number of teachers and/or administrators has there been?
There's been 22 positions cut since I became principal in 2010. Percentage-wise, I'd have to go back and do the math, but I believe it's above the attrition rate we've seen in students.
And is
Percentage-wise,
okay, is it teachers? Is it,
positions, but you know,
no, I want to know teachers.
it's the large percentage of the 22 cuts were teachers. I'd have to get back to you on the exact amount. It's definitely double digits.
so I've got some of those in numbers, not by the school, but by the overall district.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me? do you want me
That
to
would be
segue
helpful.
to that? You want to
Sure.
go to that now, or just give me a second?
I guess while he's doing that, I'm kind of curious, just for our own edification, I guess now, of those 22 positions, which ones really hurt?
The ones that really hurt, they all hurt, I guess, to what level? You know, the not having an extra guidance counselor. Now our caseload is almost 275 to 280 students per guidance counselor. So that's on the highest end you can be as far as the national standard or the state standard. That one hurt. I would say the cutting of the art teachers, Mass Core requires a certain percentage of students taking elective type courses and not having, there are 2 periods right now where we do not have an option for a kid if they move into town. They have to go online and take online courses. So having the flexibility, those 2 positions certainly hurt as well. You know, I think those are the 2 big ones. They have the largest impact on our students.
Guidance and art. Right.
Yeah. And we try to be creative when we make the cuts, but we're
Yeah,
running
no,
out of room
I
for
understand.
creativity.
All right, Mr. Sweat?
Where do the deans show up in this column?
Yeah, they're just under teachers. They're just as teachers.
This is the first time I've seen
Oh,
this, so I
sorry.
apologize.
So I should direct the question to Michael.
Yeah, they're just teacher. They are under the teacher contract, so that's where they show up.
They're under the teacher contract,
Yeah,
so
so
that's
they
where they show up.
Yeah, there is an indicator, and those
But the
actual
percentage of the
listing
time that's been teaching is,
for 1/5 is it, Scott?
If you go inside that, and I have seen this, the front page is new to me, but the inside, Michael and I went over quite a few times. So if you, I think we're in the back, if I remember correctly, of this list. This I'm very familiar with. And this, I believe you'll see a connotation on the second column from the left, if they have other responsibilities besides full-time teaching.
I guess if it's half or more of their time is not spent teaching, then to have them listed under teachers is a distortion. Does my colleague disagree based on his?
Yeah. I do disagree.
Would you like to articulate your disagreement? Share some
Yes, I'd love to hear it.
You would. When the dean positions were established, the deans were still classroom teachers and therefore were still part of Unit A. In fact, anyone who's a classroom teacher is part of Unit A, regardless of how much of their time is devoted. The deans teach 2 classes. The rest of their time is devoted to the administrative work that they do. And I will tell you from experience, 3 years experience, the dean's time is taken up 100% of the time, whereas regular classroom teachers get a prep period every day. The deans do not. They also do lunch duty, unpaid, whereas regular classroom teachers that do lunch duty are paid. Is that correct?
Correct.
They do all the administrative work that is necessary for the students in their particular class. Discipline, attendance, tracking grades, counseling. So we can say that their teaching load is less than a regular classroom teacher, but for the stipend that they're getting, quite frankly, school department is getting a bargain.
You're misinterpreting completely my question. They are, if these positions didn't exist, we'd have assistant principals to take their place, would we not?
Well, not right now. You only have one at the high school.
Yes, we
But you
took
could.
we took the money for the assistant principal, and we allocated it out to cover the teaching spots of the 4 deans and the stipend, and that it was a wash at that point in time.
Right.
Correct.
So I'm not asking you to defend the role of the dean.
I'd be happy to.
But if we, I know you would be. But the point is, since the majority of their time is spent doing administrative work, I don't care what unit, they could be in Unit Z as far as I'm concerned. To me, they're more properly classified under administration. Or at least, if you want to, you can split the FTEs between teaching and administration. I'm just looking for accuracy, not for any defense of the position.
And I think that I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mrs. Vivian.
So what I think that the reason why I have to agree and
Have to?
yeah, I have to, is only because that's what helps have us have meaningful conversation around, and also when we're trying to communicate out to the public the differences between classroom teachers and administration. And even though a piece of their position is still teaching, it's still important to have that discussion of the overall support that's being provided, and that is an administrative role. So anyway,
When we report out to the state, they're reported for their duties. I think Michael and I wanted to do this just so you could see, what their teaching responsibility is. This is in no way is something that we report out to the state. This was really more for your edification as far as knowing like where the department heads were, where the, who were the deans and what department were they in. This is not an FTE as far as a teacher of a 1.0. There are, and I forget the exact designation, but there is a designation on the SIMS data where they are like administrative other or something along those lines.
So, if I,
Go ahead, Mr.
I
McMillan.
was going to provide some background. So, what we've tried to do is we're trying to implement a degree of position control so that we have every position in the district numbered, and that's what this list goes towards, so that we can better control movement of people in positions. So when we cut positions, we're able to see change and distinguish that from movement of individuals and people. And as we were doing that, what I'm trying to do is create broad categories that are applicable across different schools. But which is why some people are in teachers, but you should be elsewhere. But it's a process of refinement. So as we get this kind of feedback, we can update the lists.
Yeah.
And I should say it is different. And I know it gets confusing. And if there's a better way, we are trying to come up with it. But this is different from what gets reported to the state. Partly because we don't report everybody to the state. So custodians, food service workers don't get reported to the state, but they're still important for us to track and maintain control of and can maintain those lists. And so that's why we've developed this, our own position list, and why it differs from what actually goes to the state.
Yeah.
And just if I can, where a teacher has specific prep time, the dean's prep time, it's based on if and when. And I believe, Mr. Lazarus, you negotiated that stipend, by the way.
Also, as we report to the state, interestingly, we report to the state by tasks almost. So it's like by their work assignment. So for deans, they will have a proportion of their time will be teaching, and a proportion of their time will be a sort of administration, for want of a better word. But so that also makes it difficult when it comes to doing individual positions to tally up those two lists.
Can I just, I'm looking at this list, which is different, but what is a team chairperson? There's one team chairperson.
Back when you were in the school, we had a school psychologist. Now we have a team chairperson that handles all the special ed meetings, and it's just a little different. It was a cost-saving measure not to have someone with all the degrees of a psychologist, and it's worked out quite well in year one.
So that person is not part of the special ed group?
It is.
Yeah.
Is it the same person, or are you double counting?
I don't believe so.
Do you have it listed on a special ed list? Oh, that's a different person. These are the special ed teachers. This is all his role is as team chair. Meetings, IEPs, etc.
Right.
And one last,
Sure.
sorry.
That's okay.
You have 7 ELA teachers, you have 8 history with JROTCs.
2 JROTC teachers.
Right. Out. And you have 6 math teachers and 7 science teachers, but your math MCAS, I know this probably isn't the right place to ask this question, but your math MCAS is not doing as well as your science. So why is it that way?
Sure, great question. So with Mass Core, there are a certain number of, of electives that are required to be taken. And then there are the bottom group, which are electives that are acceptable by the Mass Core. Our schedule is a student-run process, and every year, inevitably, the history electives are the electives that our students want to take. And there's not a lot of classes where they have flexibility. As you know, they have to take 4 years of English. So what happens is the electives are driven large percentage-wise from the history department. So there's a need for those electives in that department, which is why you may see a little disproportion in staffing.
I'm asking about the low proportion in staffing in math.
We have a math department head that is in that department as well, and I believe they're not counted in as a teacher. They are a teacher as well, and to be quite frank, that's we haven't cut in the math department since I've been principal. That's what I was left with, and that's what I've been able to maintain. When you're constantly cutting, it's tough to add a teacher, specifically when there is not a need based on requests and requirements.
Are you all set, Mrs. Whiteside? Mrs. Vugan, did you have a question?
Just real quick, just going back to this document, because
Yeah.
I feel this document is meaningful when it's just taking a look at going into this budget cycle. And I know that driving down into the detail is also important. But when it goes back to the point that we were talking about deans, I think one thing that would be meaningful is if you actually added a column underneath administration called dean,
Yeah.
and then added the number there, and then down in the teacher category, you basically put dean slash, 1/4 or 1/3 teacher.
Yeah.
Not that we want to double count, but you basically make a note saying C, dean category or something, just so we're kind of pulling that out there.
Yeah.
Just so we then have a full administrative picture on the top level there. So,
Makes sense.
awesome, thank you.
When we can, thank you.
But
Go ahead. Yes.
I just think it's important to note that our deans are not in the administrative unit. They are in the teachers' bargaining unit, and crossing the two would be very difficult for our deans to operate under.
Agreed. I think that it's what this document is meant for, to basically show, not from a bargaining unit, but this is this a document that basically says where are people placed within the district? That's a document that would be great.
Okay, Mr. Sweat?
Yeah, I completely agree. This, yeah, right.
It won't happen.
Same comment could be made with respect to department heads. So I think getting a clear picture. By the way, we're doing nothing but nitpicking this document, but it's a wonderful document. So thank you for the document, and I appreciate the fact that it's a work in progress, and the definitions are a part of that. But to me, a more important topic is to be, I think the phrase you used, student-driven. One of my concerns is that even though I love things to be student-driven and student-centric, I also have to worry about productivity. Do we have an overriding principle with respect to the productivity of the employees that we hire? In other words, we expect a certain amount of work out of a custodian, a certain amount of work out of a secretary. If there was a class of less than X, whatever it is, would we say, I'm sorry, we can't run that class?
Sure, absolutely.
But I'm told that the high school has a relatively large number of what I'll call small classes.
So there's probably, obviously not including the special ed department, there's probably a few that, and 2 or 3 that are less than like whatever that number is that you would set. But overall, going back again, the teachers decided that they wanted to keep their class size low, maintain the same load, and all agreed to pick up an extra class. So it allows us to have that flexibility where our teachers are teaching. Basically, if you look at Old Rochester, they have two preps every day. Our teachers have 1. Our teachers picked up an extra class to maintain that flexibility in the scheduling and to keep the class size as low as possible. Are there a few classes that you would look at and say, wow, that's pretty disproportionate? Absolutely. Does it happen every year? No. It's just sometimes the matrix of the schedule, the rotation, the needs of the students, and it's gotten better over the years.
So there are only 2 or 3 classes where there might be 10 kids in it.
That's about right. Yeah, 10 or less.
Okay, thank you.
Just before we move on, what for this year, kids graduating this year, what's the total credit requirement?
130 credits.
And what was it in the prior 2 years?
We went 115, 120. I think last year was 125.
All right, and then next year it'll be?
I believe next year's 135.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean,
and then it will stay at that because you start to get to a point where you can't attain that with the schedule.
So no, I just want to know. I know that was discussed in the accreditation and such.
Sure.
So,
right.
So we're either there or we're getting there or there.
Right. And most schools are anywhere from 110 to 115.
Do you know what ORR's is? You just haven't mentioned it.
Old Rochester's is 115, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to staffing changes. You heard earlier about the technology, and we're very happy with where we are this year, and we're looking to improve. One of the improvements that we need to have is we have a part-time paraprofessional who does an outstanding job in his limited time in the building. But when you infuse X number of new devices into the building, you need to have that tech support. And if we're able to increase his current .55 position to a 1.0, it would impact the budget with $10,000 increase, and we would have the technological support we need during the day. Right now, we only get part of that in the afternoon. So that's a level service. Minimal school improvement. It was embarrassing this summer. We had a lot of students that are looking for transcripts throughout the summer, and I believe we're the only school that doesn't have 2 calendar year secretaries in the building. We have 1 calendar year secretary who is entitled to vacations, and oftentimes the school is unoccupied with no one there. If the assistant is on vacation and or at a training, and likewise for me, there's no one there to greet people, there's no one there to answer questions, there's no one there to get transcripts, and it becomes very frustrating. I'm at a minimal school improvement. I'd like to see us change a school year secretary to a calendar year secretary, and the maximum impact would be $10,000, but it could be less than that based on the step that the person, if we're able to post it, is on.
It sounds like that's very important. I mean, and I always, not always, but I often watch the selectmen meetings and such, and I listen to the town administrator discuss, cutting a town hall, and it's like when nobody's there to, when someone's knocking on the door at these town hall offices and they're away, I mean, that is more than embarrassing. I mean, they're not getting their services for, they're paying taxes and no one's there to answer the door. So
Right,
that sounds pretty important.
And my assistant and I pride ourselves on being in school anytime school's in session. So if we are going on vacation, we try and schedule it over the summer. And it gets difficult when you have, no one there to answer the door, no one there to answer questions. And I would assume a lot of that gets kicked back to the superintendent when they can't get the answer they want at the high school. The question was asked before, what was one of the toughest cuts, and certainly it was the guidance position, the 1.0 guidance position that we cut this past year. Excellent guidance counselor, and it was tough for the kids, and then we had to reshuffle the deck, and everyone was forced to, I shouldn't say everyone, a third of the school was forced to have a new guidance counselor. So that was difficult. So I think from a significant improvement, the guidance counselor's on there, but probably more importantly is an adjustment counselor. We haven't had an adjustment counselor for many years. We're getting students that are coming in from other towns, from our town, that have emotional needs, and it's very difficult. Right now we have someone in on Tuesdays and Thursdays to help out with that, but when the issue happens on Thursday, it's very difficult when you have a psychologist for 3 hours a week. It's better than nothing, but we certainly think that that's a very important and significant improvement that we could make. I'm sure you've probably all read about it. The middle school has an unbelievable cross-country, I'm going to call it an intramural program. And I believe they were just in the paper. I believe they just came back from a 5K, and I want to say it was maybe in the Taunton area or something. And they've got a huge following. We had to cut the cross-country position due to budgetary concerns about 3 or 4 years ago. And with these kids coming up and wanting to have a program, I'd really like to see us support that. Again, it's a significant improvement, and it's a minimal impact. Basically, there's a small stipend for the coach and a very small amount of money for transportation, just like in some sports where they don't have officials. They don't have officials here for cross-country. The 8th grade waiver has been phenomenal for us for athletics, and one of the things it's done is it's really created an unbelievable environment for girls athletics, specifically with basketball. We were barely able to field 2 teams a while back, and now we're at the point where we have more than enough for 2 teams, and we have enough 8th and 9th graders where we could actually support a freshman girls basketball program moving forward. So those are kind of significant school improvements, and certainly if this is a good time to pause, I would love to take questions if that's appropriate.
Yeah, just you mentioned the middle school cross-country in Taunton. I know in Taunton they had a...
In Wareham, they competed in Taunton.
In Wareham.
The Wareham kids, and they went to a race in Taunton. I read about it in one of the local papers.
Was that a 5K?
Yes.
Yes.
I think that was the Jolly Jaunt.
Yes, that was
yeah,
one.
Right. That's it's a really, it's interesting. It's it's all different ages and stuff, but it's not really a cross-country thing per se, they just do 5Ks all over the place.
Right.
But now, we had cut the cross-country at the high school because it was undersubscribed, right?
It was a budgetary cut. We looked at the least subscribed
Sure,
programs.
sure, and
There were still kids that were very
Yeah.
interested.
Okay. All right, I just throw it out there. Good. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's not my fault. All right, go ahead, Mrs. Whiteside.
I guess this is a question about consolidation of services. You run a summer school, why are not all of the summer schools in one building? That's part one of the question. And then part two of the question is, other than having a janitor in the building, why can't central admin access any, what do you call those things? When you want to leave? Transcripts. Why isn't that, it's all online, why can't that be done at central instead of going, instead of having the building open, fully staffed and all that other good stuff?
I'm not sure a secretary is fully staffed, but the transcript from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s are not online, and believe it or not, we get as many requests for those as we do for the ones that are online. I think it's also difficult when we have people moving in and bringing in their transcripts looking to enroll, and we're making sure that they have all their documents in order so that when we have the guidance counselors in August, they can enroll. What we found is when you have multiple hands in the pot, it becomes very difficult to make sure you have everything you need when you're paying guidance counselors per diems to come in. You want to have everything in order. You want to have meetings arranged, times, and you want to make sure all the documentation is in order. So,
And can you answer the question about summer schools? All
I think I can. It would be, this is just the high school principal's opinion. You've got two issues. One, I have 5 rooms that have air conditioning in the high school, whereas in other schools, I think they have, well, specifically the middle school, and Mr. Mickle, good timing, they have a few more rooms, I'm sure not a lot, and I know the elementary schools have hardly any rooms with air conditioning. The other issue is the sheer size. Since they incorporated a few of the grant-run programs, the size of the summer school has more than tripled, and it's too large to fit in one building. As a matter of fact, I think you're coming close to needing 3 buildings. I know when I walk through the middle school, there's more occupancy in there than even in the high school, and we're using 2 levels of the high school.
So that,
Looking at the slide that's up there, I know that we haven't had an adjustment council in a number of years, and we certainly need another guidance position. If you could have one or the other, what would it be?
Well, the adjustment counselor is the top priority.
I would agree with that. That we need somebody that kids can go to and talk to all the time, not just on a part-time basis. And if I recall, the adjustment counselor could see those students on an ongoing basis as well.
Correct, and right now, that's spread between the assistant principal, the school resource officer, guidance when they're available, and myself.
that's all set. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, moving on.
Okay. So, capital priorities, the tough part is that we've got a 25-year-old building. And our maintenance budget allows us to fix things when they break. It's a Band-Aid mentality. So we're never able at the end of the heating season really to do much because all of our money has been exhausted in fixing pipes that are leaking, pipes that are bursting, valves that aren't working, actuator valves that are staying open, and et cetera, et cetera. So there are some serious safety issues that need to be addressed. Probably the most important is the replacement of the rubber stair treads. I think it was about 3 or 4 days, I guess it was about 3 days ago, we had 3 kids fall down the center stairs because they lost traction. That can't happen. I'd like to get all 3 replaced, but Michael and I discussed maybe doing the middle stairwell first and then going from there. But it's a safety issue, and it basically at one point had traction. It's the most commonly used stairwell in the school, and we're going to try and figure out a way to at least replace that stairwell with new treads coming up this summer, we hope. Our doors are rusting from the inside out. We have mice that can penetrate the building because of settling. The doors, even when we put mechanisms on the bottom, sweeps as they call them, it still doesn't allow for a tight seal. More importantly, we can't screw the seals into the doors because the bottom of the doors are rusting out from the inside out. So we do need to start having a plan on replacing doors. We have to start replacing some of our condensing units. We haven't put any money into those. They are now 25 years old, and they're in very rough shape. I mentioned we only have 5 classrooms that have air conditioning. When we started, we had approximately 20 classrooms that had air conditioning. We just haven't been able to do anything with those units. Our boilers are coming up on 25 years of age as well. We have a 5-stage system where we have boilers that come on as the temperature gets colder outside. We knocked down 2 25,000-gallon silos, which were basically your hot water tanks, because we didn't need those. That was if every hot water faucet shower was on at one point in time, you would have enough hot water for that. That's never the case in the high school. We went down to 3 domestic water tanks running off 1 stage boiler, and that boiler is used all the time, and that one is on the fritz and needs to be replaced. That's a common theme, 25 years. All of our desks and chairs are 25 years of age, and they are starting to go. There's been a lot of wear and tear on those desks and chairs over the years. We need to come up with a plan to start replacing some of those desks and chairs so they all don't go at one point in time. So those are capital priorities for FY16. If you want me to pause, I can pause. And
Mrs. Fugan?
So with things that are more office supplies and things like that, things like air conditioning and also the tables and chairs, are we taking a look at different office supply stores or Lowe's or places that might donate capital items? Sometimes with some of the bigger box stores that they do err towards donating products and services than they do with donation of dollars. So, I mean, especially, you're not going to get it for, a condensing unit or for, the boiler. But for those kind of capital items, are we taking a look at ways that we might be able to get donations from some of the big box stores?
certainly something we'll investigate. We have a pretty good relationship with WB Mason and Staples. There have been no offers to this point to the high school, but certainly it's something we can investigate. I don't think it's going to solve our bigger problem, which is, the whole school is at some point in time in the very near future going to be in need of tables and chairs.
Yep. No, it's just one way, like you create one proposal and basically just blanket it out, and then somebody does, I know everybody's busy, but they, we're basically seeing that they're more likely to donate products and services than they are money these days.
I agree.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you. On the floors, is that pure materials or is that material and labor?
Material and labor,
Okay.
that's for 3 stairwells. And the middle stairwell has a little bit more square footage than the front and the back, just because of the nature of the design.
I think maybe what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is maybe bring in the maintenance guys to see how they'd be able to do it. And
Great.
see if they could help out. on
Appreciate that.
The only other thing I would ask real quick is on the condensing units, does that bring you back to 20 rooms, or is it
no.
way off? On
No,
that?
that's 2 units.
2
So,
units. So
brings
how
us, I try and approach things with a 5-year plan,
Mhm.
because we can never do everything at once. So and I think that'll be identified in a future slide, that we're trying to
Okay.
do just a little bit each year to get us to where we need to be.
All right.
Don't get me wrong, I'd like to get it done in 1 year, but I know the reality of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In replacing your boiler, I would assume that you would end up with a more efficient plant. Did you reflect that in your...
It would be more efficient, and this would be, there'd be a rebate as well from National Grid. So this is what it would actually cost us when all was said and done. There'd be a little bit more money we'd have to front, but we would get that back in a rebate as soon as it's signed off on.
What's the energy savings?
I believe we'd be going from a system that is 80% efficient to a system that's in the mid-90s. So it's a tremendous savings. And keep in mind, that is the #1 boiler, which, as I mentioned, runs all of our domestic hot water and is part of the heating system. So it's the one that's used most
How
often.
much you spend?
It's hard to say on that one specifically because we do have 5-stage boilers.
What's your energy bill? What do you?
Tom, can you talk around the microphone? The air conditioner is barking you out.
Michael, I believe it's over $100,000 a year in natural gas. Is that?
that sounds about right.
And obviously, it depends on the number of heating days, the heating degree days, but it fluctuates anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 depending on the season. We're hoping for closer to 75 this year.
Yeah, it's just worth saying, so these are capital proposals, so we have to take all the capital requirements for the whole district and prioritise them and submit them to the capital planning committee. And only then the town has to go through the same process of prioritising. So those requests are not reflected in lower utility budget next year. In the event that we got it, then we would be able to make that adjustment, but at the moment we are not. We have adjusted the high school's utilities because of the high school roof. So that is in place, and that will, we hope, reduce some of the heating costs. But these items are not reflected because they're just not certain yet. Yeah, we'll see, but unfortunately the high school boiler isn't even in our top 5 list. Sadly.
It's on my top 5.
Yeah. But we'll see.
So I do want to mention, you don't see the roof on there. This is the first time in probably 10 years you don't see that, and we're very appreciative of the fact that the roof went up. And Michael mentioned that there's some incremental savings that I was able to cut. What we found is there were some insulation needs that weren't addressed with the old roof, and by addressing those, we're anticipating some savings in our heating account because the gaps that were there on the ceiling are not there. So we're anticipating some savings. I don't want to call it significant, but some savings, and every little bit helps.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, and I appreciate both of you actually thinking about it. When they showed the gap to you, instead of saying, hey, we've only got so much money, you actually addressed it. In the past, we've done a lot of things on the cheap in the town and suffered the consequences, so I appreciate that.
Mrs. Vugan?
Sorry, I just had one more question when it came to the capital priorities. In the world of safety and security and lockdowns, we talked a lot about the exterior doors, but the interior doors in the classrooms. Where is that on the priority list when it comes to the locking systems within the classroom if something happens?
So, the locking systems itself are in decent shape. Internal doors, obviously, we're talking about. We're in pretty decent shape. We have a good system. We've done a good job maintaining the maintenance. Anytime there's an issue, we address it. And we're experimenting with some technology that's out there with Matt. It's not cutting-edge technology, but in regards to being able to lock the doors from the inside if we do go to lockdown. So we're in pretty good shape with the interior doors. It's the exterior doors that are in rough shape.
Thanks.
Okay. So I'll try not to bore you with this, but I said
Just like, how much longer do you think you have here?
2 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
Am I doing all right?
You're doing fine.
Okay.
You started a little late, that's why.
All right.
Yeah.
You're not going to blame it on me. Okay,
No,
good.
blame it on Christian.
Blame it on Christian. Okay, he's back there. Okay. Some of this is repetition, but this is kind of what we've gone through. And like I said, unfortunately, we can't buy things at once and fix and solve the problem. So what we try and do, whether it be the security cameras, whether it be the proximity scanners, whether it be locks on doors, we try and take it as a plan. Some plans are longer than others, but basically what we're hoping to do is replace 4 doors every year, and we haven't started it, but I'm hoping this year will be the start of the 6-year plan. Replacement of 2 rooftop condensers, 2 a year, 7-year plan. Replacement of the stage boiler. I mentioned there were 5 of those. If we can do 1 a year. And I don't really have a big problem with doing it 1 at a time, because what's nice is, theoretically, if you're not replacing everything at once, it's not going to die at once. So we can stagger the pain down the other end. Desk and chairs, 5-year plan. We're halfway, and some of these things we've accomplished that I don't have on here, and I won't bore you with because the multi-year projects have been accomplished. But we are painting classrooms. The frustrating part is some of the classrooms we painted have water damage from the old roof, but we'll go back, and once we're confident in the new roof, we'll go back and fix those areas. But we're trying to paint 12 classrooms per year. We're halfway through that 10-year plan. something as simple as replacing water bubblers. We're replacing one per year. We're 2 years into a 5-year plan. And so that's kind of how we attack things. So those are the multi-year projects that we're working on right now. And that's it.
Any more questions for Mr. Palladino? Mr. Sweat?
How did the roof project come in from a dollars perspective?
I believe it was well under the budget. I'll have Michael speak to it.
So our original quote, or the original total we went to town meeting to was 2.7 million. So that was based on the architect's plans and MSBA guidelines and the kind of worst case scenario. At the moment, it looks like it's not finished yet, so we're still working on it, but it should be around $1 million. Yeah.
Whoa,
So we
whoa,
got, yeah.
2.7
$1 million.
budget, 1 million actual?
Yep. And it'll be completed early. So
Come with
we
green
got
stamps?
it comes. So we
Is
got
that because of the state's mandates about how the formula?
it's partly that. It's partly the bidding process. We got a company, Gateway Roofing, who came in with a low bid to win the contract.
Sounds like we have plenty of money for a condenser and a few
So,
doors.
My esteemed colleague on the town side will tell us that we don't have that money.
I understand.
We did a
That was
great
just-
job to be
Yeah.
able to keep the
Yes.
costs low,
Yes.
and we didn't have to borrow more.
Exactly. So sadly, it doesn't transfer.
I think it was the timing
Yeah.
and the fact that we had a local company that won the bid. Those were to me, those were the two pieces. The time, it was the end of the summer. They were looking for work, and they were out of Westport, which isn't
That's
too bad.
extraordinary.
I know.
But it is a great point to make that the residents don't think that we suddenly have 1.7 million
Yeah,
in cash.
exactly.
I understand you understand it, but
Yeah.
that's, it's just, we were borrowing. And then with the MSBA reimbursement, what's the full amount you think that would be?
So 6 to 8%. So it'll be somewhere in the region of 680,000. There are a couple of small fees that are not reimbursable, like legal costs or not, but the majority of it is reimbursable at 6 to 8%.
So that roof was done for essentially for our cost, 300,000 to 400,000 at the max, which is amazing.
Right, and I think that the point to be made, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I speak?
Yes.
Great. I think the point to be made here is that the original figures were based on the quotes and the research that was being done at that time, but that the administration kept looking for more efficient ways to be able to get that roof project to come in at the lowest money so that we didn't have to borrow more money and we didn't have to have a bigger dollar amount to pay back.
And it helps, one of the things that's a learning experience as well is because you do it through the MSBA, you have a really excellent project. They line you up with a really good project manager, a really good architect, and working with them, we were able to really manage the project well to keep it on, and with the contractor as well, who's done a good job. So I think, doing it well, so investing in a good project management, investing in good engineering helps to offset costs in the long run. That's been my experience anyway.
Hence the reason that we should definitely move forward with the Minot project.
Yeah.
And the best part was, when I came into school yesterday, there were no leaks, no buckets,
Really?
no issues. And we had some significant rain the night before.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
I think we're concluded with the high
Okay,
school.
and you're good with the spreadsheet here? There's no questions on that?
Any questions regarding that? No, that'd be good.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Minkle, do you think, would you be better off over here?
Stop, Scott.
Morning, Dan.
Morning.
That's wrong, that's wrong. We don't have 7
Michael,
Yes.
just one quick point, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Okay, just because somebody might bring it up as we're going through the staffing.
Yes.
Underneath the middle school, if you take a look at the art line item, it basically says that Mr. Nicole has 7 art teachers, and everyone else has 1 or 2 or something, so Just want to make sure that we don't have a big art push in middle school.
We have three teachers.
Oh, it's three? Three, sorry.
So the list is,
Yeah, so the real question, is that a classification issue or a typo?
yeah, let's find out. Wareham Middle School. So the art teachers we have listed are Andrea Barrett, Cynthia Gedridis, Noelle Johnson, or she's no, she's not. Cheryl Kidney, what are they?
Language arts.
Language, oh, that's what it is. ELA.
Grade 5 and grade 7.
And Gerald Ulrich
Jerry Howard is the music teacher.
is music.
So-
And Julie Walker.
Julie Walker is in the STEAM Academy, grade 7.
And then David Filsinger.
So,
And Phil Singer is the
So
art
those-
teacher, yes.
So those are the changes.
so those numbers have to shift to the real teachers, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they'll move to. So I'll update the database and I can send the
Yeah.
adjusted report.
Yeah, and I think the key word was mentioned by the superintendent at the beginning here. This is all a big draft.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that it
We're not
came up to me and
actually.
I want
I'd much
somebody
like to be pushing the arts.
dive into that work.
All right, are we ready to start with the middle school? Who should start, Mr. McMillan or Mr. Minkle?
Mr. McCool,
Okay.
it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. I think I know everybody here. Good morning. My admin team gave me a pat on the back, said, Dan, you can do this, just before I walked over from the middle school this morning. And I have, working with the privilege of working with a really good team. So, just by way of introduction, I think that when I started to think about the budget and the superintendent and Michael indicated to us, that we were going to be making a presentation, I kind of start to think about what it all means. And I think that we make a lot of decisions and have a lot of conversation about curriculum and scheduling, and I think that budget is probably the last big piece that we have to, in terms of the middle school, understand what our needs are. And I acknowledge that we have 50% of our kids in the middle school are considered to be high needs. 20% of our kids are special needs, and we are a level 3 school. So I think that the budget, when I started to look at the budget, I considered those things, and just because I have so much history at the middle school, I know that in 2013 we increased our student body by 25%, but at the same time, in the last 2 years, we've had cuts in administration and in special needs. So these are some of the thoughts that I have in terms of looking at the budget big picture before we start to get into specifics. And in terms of, this is a first-time experience for me, so if you can just bear with me in terms of going through the slides, I'll do my best. But in terms of the enrollment summary, and to go back to the enrollment summary, the number of...
Michael, go back one.
There you go, yeah.
And again, I think what's revealing here is the percentages that's being showed by grade level for free and reduced lunch and special education, because that certainly presents part of our challenge. And to go to the class size, I think the class size is a little bit deceiving because that slide shows all of our substantially separate programs in the building, which the class size of the core subject class size is close to 20. And the 17.81 reflects every single program in the building, and some of those are substantially separate with just fewer than 10 children. The school improvement priorities, and I'm not going to to read through this. This is something that we did in June at length. I will tell you that all of the school improvement priorities under literacy and math are ongoing, that are in place and ongoing. And I can certainly answer any questions that you might have about that slide if necessary.
Anyone have any questions about this slide?
I had a question about a previous slide. Does that count?
I did too, yeah. Can we go to the
Okay.
previous one? I didn't know if you want to go through all the way through your presentation and then...
Whatever
Okay.
whatever is
All right,
easiest.
This works great. So go ahead, Mr. Swett.
Well, actually, the very first slide.
Oh, one more.
Thank you. I appreciate that you have a high-needs population. Does the fact that you inherited a 23.5% fifth grade class, is that an anomaly, or is there a trend? In other words, to go from 23 to 17, that's a big drop.
Yes.
And yet it's the fifth graders. How much dynamism is there in the classification of a student? And by that I mean, once a child has an IEP, how often does a child not have an IEP?
You mean how often would a child be...
Lose the IEP status.
Be written off the IEP status? I wouldn't have a hard and fast number, Jeff, but I would say that it's not common.
It's not common.
It's not common. I think as a district, and again, I'm not special needs.
I understand.
Expert, but I think that what we need to have is systems in place where we're not looking at IEPs and 504s as being the answer in terms of it being a panacea for helping kids.
I understand completely, but I'm going to be talking to our asking our two elementary students, because if that 23.5% basically continues to roll, that's a big impact on the cost of the services that we have to provide.
Right. And again, as many years as a classroom teacher, and certainly looking at it from a kind of a different vantage point now, I would say that a lot of what you see in accommodations, some parents might disagree with me on this, comes under the heading of good teaching. And so I think part of the challenge for us is to improve at how we deliver instruction, how we assess kids, how we group kids through our master schedule, so that we're not always trying to go to a plan that's different from what we're doing on a daily basis in classrooms.
I greatly appreciate the candor, but as you point out...
That's what I'm famous for, Jeff.
I appreciate that too. But as you point out, once someone has an IEP, it's really hard to get a parent to say, okay, this child does not need an IEP anymore. So the real solution to the 23.5% occurs before the students get to you.
I would agree, but I think at the same time, if I'm a parent of a special needs student, or if I'm a parent that has a child on a 504, then I need to feel that the child is experiencing some success and has some momentum, and that child's needs are being met, and then we can have the conversation.
That's a great point. I love to hear you say it, and I greatly appreciate it. Can we go to the next slide? We could spend all the...
Michael, did you need a question on that slide?
May I throw something into this
Okay,
discussion?
okay, because I didn't know if you wanted it back.
Yeah, we'll go back.
All right, okay.
With the pleasure of who I was asking.
Did you have your own... Did I generate the question?
Yes.
That's not allowed.
Okay.
I'm kidding. It's up to the chair.
So do you yield to Mr.?
I yield to my colleague.
Mr. Lazarus.
3 years, in the 3 years that I was dean, I had one student who turned 18 who took himself off of an IEP. One. I had two students. One, a student who turned 18, and one, a parent who said, I don't know why I ever did this in the first place, took kids off of 504s. It is extremely difficult to get parents to understand that just because a kid's got ADHD, and I don't know who's listening to this and I don't care, just because a kid's got ADHD doesn't mean he needs an IEP. Is that blunt enough?
I'll take back the floor if that's okay with the chair.
Yes, it is.
Those are remarkable numbers in terms of class size. I realize they fluctuate, but they don't fluctuate all that much. I mean, from the 6 is obviously special ed, but I know a lot of districts that would be incredibly jealous of those class sizes. I mean, that's a fact.
See, and I was gonna get there too, 'cause that
I don't
seems,
think it's an accurate representation.
I'm jealous of the class sizes at Wareham High School.
but
That's a
even,
separate issue, and I acknowledge that you've stated that, and you heard my question of Mr. Palladino, but let's stick to the middle school for the moment.
Okay, sure.
So, but I just,
One district.
but I just heard someone I respect say that it is not representative. I was wondering if the chair would allow Dr. Schwalm to elaborate on that comment.
of course.
Well, I would just say that if you take into consideration all of the classes, that's what they're doing with this math, right? So you're talking about all the substantially separate programs which have maybe 2 or 3 students or 5 students in their groups, right? And then, but when I'm in middle school and I see class size, I'm going to tell you it is not representative of 17 students. Classes are full.
No, and I think
So,
Mr.
he
Minkle
did
mentioned that.
mention that,
It was
but
like
it's
20.
really, that, I'm not saying that there's it's right at the peak of, it's okay at the moment, in other words, but if any more entered, there would be less space, really.
What is the number?
I'm a little confused. If I see 6.38, and I'm assuming that those are separate classes, that's the average for a separate class for a sped child, okay? When I see science at 20.25, what is the math that is causing that to be not representative?
It's not what I see when I go there, so can you explain it a little bit? Because I don't see 17.
I think what's misleading, Jeff, is that we have, and again, this came up in our school improvement plan last June, is that we this year went to intervention, a complete intervention period. And because of that, we have kids in classes that are being with targeted instruction for intervention. And that's part of what's being represented here when you see the class size has 6 or 8. So we have a number of kids in our academic engagement block during the day with no more than 8 kids in a class because it's targeted instruction. So,
You know, I'm a data guy.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
hear you, but I still want to know, what is the process by which we come to 20.25? What is the math that generated that number?
every regular ed science class in all 4 grades.
Okay.
If you put
If you
those
take them-
together and counted the number of kids in each
And then
science class.
divide by the number of teachers?
Correct. Correct.
So
That's how we
seems
got
like
that
a
number.
fundamentally valid number. So, but you're suggesting it's not an accurate way of looking at class sizes?
I'm suggesting that it's not an accurate way of looking at class sizes building-wide, because when you look at the entire 17.81, it reflects every class in the building that has a child with a
I'm not
teacher.
looking at 17.81 because that's
Okay.
distorted by the 6.38.
Okay.
That's less important to me than every other number. As I said, a lot of school districts would be jealous of, forget the 6.38, every other one is basically within 19 to 21. Those are great numbers. And as you pointed out, if you take those numbers with great teaching, you should have great results.
Could I interject? What we're really looking at, and we're starting to dig into this, is we're looking at each building, and we're looking at each course. We're then looking at what the numbers of students in each course would be, so we can look at a percentage of how many courses have X number of students, and then overall. Because when you look at this information, this is by school, not by grade level. And when we look at staffing, we need to look at where we are in teachers in each subject area. And that's what we're digging in to do. This is just an overview, but we will be happy to provide more specific and detailed information as we move forward.
Are you suggesting that, I keep pointing at the science number, that the seventh grade might be much higher and the sixth
Yes.
grade might be much lower?
Yes.
Seventh grade is our largest class in the building, so we have 218 seventh graders. That's our largest class of the 4 grades.
But that's offset by the first part of the slide, which shows your seventh grade, your average class size is 18.55. So your numbers are very deceiving if you're telling us that the last column is not correct. And I agree with Jeff, you leave the 638 out.
Okay.
I mean, you know what I'm saying, in terms of the mathematical accuracy. I'm looking at your first column, which I believe to be accurate.
Okay. Point taken.
When I look at, and I guess from my standpoint, when I look at average class sizes, I can look at fifth grade having 17.5. But that really doesn't tell me what I want to know. What I want to know is what each class by subject area, what the max number is and what's the least number, because it gives us a couple of indicators. Number one, if I have if I have a math class that has 10 kids, another period I have a math class with 25 kids, that gives me an indicator of a couple things. Number one, I don't have enough sections being offered at the course number of 20-some kids, and I need to look at how are we scheduling and do a better job scheduling, because it should be a fairly even distribution along the way, and that's our goal. And part of that is how do we build the master schedule, and that's what we're trying to hone in, because ideally, anytime I look at master scheduling, I need to have X number of seats at the very bottom of my schedule master, because I have X number of students that I have to have seated at any one period. And if I don't have those seats available, then I'm going to have a huge disparity in class sizes. That's number one. Number two, when I go to schedule, or not me particularly, but when anybody goes to build a master schedule, you always build singletons first, because singletons control your master schedule. And if I haven't placed my singletons in the correct spot, I'm going to also have that wide range. There are some classes that control your master schedule, and that's where we're looking at what our class sizes are, and that's why it matters. So we're starting to dig into that information. We're starting to hone our skills in master scheduling, because it certainly impacts the overall product.
Let me agree completely.
Thank you.
That
Everybody heard this.
Everybody's agreeable today.
That I don't have the expertise, I don't even want the knowledge to do what you just described. But it is the school committee's job to say, do we have a reasonable level of overall productivity? And then for you to manipulate the people that you've got within that productivity so that they are optimally used, okay? And what I'm seeing is, and I don't mean it to be pejorative, I don't see extraordinary productivity there. I see that as a luxury that many districts would love to have. So that's what I have to that's what I have to perceive from those numbers. I have no choice but to perceive relatively low productivity, which should turn into that much better opportunities for people like Andrea to say, okay, we've got an opportunity here. How do we maximize the impact of that opportunity? So I don't want to get into what you described, because I don't know anything about what you described.
And I guess from my standpoint, I agree with you, because I always ask for master schedules, because I built enough master schedules in my career that I know how you can manipulate data. That's why we're looking at this, and we're honing into it. Are we as efficient as we want to be? No, but I will guarantee you next year we will be much more efficient district-wide.
Great. I yield back to the chair.
All right, thank you. I mean, you covered a lot of what I wanted to say, but I'd ask the superintendent, I'd love to get a public discussion on what, we always use the jargon of 504s and IEPs, and we're doing it right now, but anyone watching this would have no clue what those are. Is that more, should we discuss this now, or when we do the special education?
We can discuss it with the special education, and what we could also do is do a little blurb and put it on our website about what a 504 means.
That'd be awesome.
And what
Yeah.
special education means, and how do we identify. But I think we have to be very careful, because we certainly do not want to violate any
Right.
student's
Right.
rights.
That's what I mean. It's a very sensitive thing, but at the same time, we need to be candid about it and understand what it is and be frank about it.
It's also protected by federal law and state law. A 504 certainly carries much more weight, because that's Office of Civil Rights, and nobody wants to get in the crosshairs of the Office of Civil Rights.
Sure.
It's not encouraging.
So we'll discuss that under special education?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
It's not encouraging.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mrs. Fugan?
What is, out of DESI or out of the state or nation, what is the recommended class size in middle school? And I know that it probably fluctuates with different categories or different classes, but on average,
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not
a recommendation?
There's not really a recommendation. Ideally, we would love to have under 24. And depending on the course, would be less than. Because if we're working with a population of high needs, if we could have classes of 12 to 15, that would be ideal.
And so the reason why I bring up this point is that I want to make sure that we're not walking away, that the average or that the recommended class size is 30 to 32 or something like that. It's not, we are not that far off, and I have to say that when we talk about how other districts would be jealous of our class sizes, when I take a look at my own student and the friends and colleagues that have their and this is in other states, but in other schools, their average class size for private, and they try to keep it between 12 and 15.
Right.
So that's my jealousy.
What do you mean by
Peter.
private?
So meaning, French immersion schools, charter schools. But all I'm saying is that there's a huge, jealousy factor when it comes to class size. So that's the reason why I just wanted to make sure if
You
it
really
is
want to
around.
talk about inequality in the United
Mr.
States?
Sweat,
No, I
excuse me.
just wanna
Mrs.
basically
Fugan has the
say-
floor, Mr. Sweat.
Thank you very much. I just want to basically say that when we take a look at our class sizes, absolutely other districts will probably could see this and say, I wish that I had that. But it's not that that the rest of the districts out there have class sizes of 30 to 35 and we're at the low 20s. That's the only point that I'm making.
Right, so if I could just make a point about that it's not just about numbers. So I'm looking about the chemistry within a classroom. I'm thinking about the challenges that a particular group presents. Some of us who have been teachers know that I've had classes of 27, 28, and just take off running with them. And then I've had classes of maybe a little less than half of that have been hugely challenging. So it's not just about just sheer
Good
numbers.
point. Thanks.
Do you want to move on?
Absolutely.
Yes, let's do that.
Right, I want to get past the second slide. Okay, so again, with the school improvement priorities as part of this, when we get into, Michael, if we can go to the next one. I love having Michael at the controls. This is a luxury. The only part of this, and I just want to mention this because it's an ongoing conversation about bring your own device. I have given the kind of the template for a letter that will go home to parents to the school council last week, actually, for them to look at and see. And I have a couple of parents on school council that are very invested and have no problem with offering advice to have them look at that. Because we're still, we're still pushing to have bring your own device at the middle school. And the other comment that I would make about iPads is that they're quickly becoming obsolete and being replaced by Chromebooks. And the superintendent brought us, she was ahead of this by having Chromebooks brought into the 6th grade at the middle school last year. To go to the MCAS data, and again, I have percentages in terms of where the middle school stands with regard to the state that I can go through if it's necessary. I know that we've had an MCAS presentation earlier in the school year.
Mrs. Vugan?
Yeah. The question that I had when it comes to making budgetary decisions based on curriculum needs or based on student achievement needs, we heard a presentation last night about the FAST assessment that's going on in the elementary school and how we're able to start taking a look and chopping up the data in a way where we can pinpoint ways to be able to move our students forward. They mentioned something about the 6th and 7th grade. Can you elaborate just a little bit on the assessment tools that you're using so then we can pinpoint exactly where our highest need students or even our mid-level need students are struggling so we can move them forward?
So we've, thanks to Dr. Swan, we have FAST assessment that we've used at the middle school. We've assessed all of the kids in the building. I have data on 6th and 7th grade so far. And again, to go back to speak from a classroom teacher's point of view, if I have a group of kids in front of me, I have to go by what my intuition tells me. I have to go by what my own assessments tell me. With FAST assessment, it helps me to pinpoint where kids are lacking in specific skills.
Great, and so
and it can give me automatic feedback, which is what we have.
So I was saying that I actually got to see it because the first FAST assessment came out and was given to parents. The same thing happened in the middle school where students in the middle school level in 6th and 7th grade, that the parents were actually able to see their own child's FAST assessment. Great, thank you.
Actually, right through 8. So the assessment data, 7th and 8th is for reading, specifically because the FAST assessment hasn't created the math portion yet. So it went K to 6 for everyone for both, 7, 8, jumped on for literacy. Yeah, for literacy, and it's mostly focuses on comprehension.
Thank you.
Can I just ask?
Sorry.
Yes, go right ahead, Ms. Whiteside.
What's the lag time on you assess the child on August 1st. What's the date that you get the report on the child, the FAST?
For FAST,
Pretty immediate.
the turnaround is pretty immediate.
Okay.
Computer generated. And the other thing I would say about Chromebooks, and I'm requesting more Chromebooks for next year, but classroom teacher in 6th grade that used Chromebooks last year, I approached her and said, why were the Chromebooks? Why did they work? And one of the things that she can do is she can create her own data and her own spreadsheets on her own assessments, and she can do it on the spot, which, I mean, I can remember going to when we moved over to the high school, I won't tell you what year that was, being excited because somebody had left me a brand new box of chalk. And I'm just amazed at how fast and how far we've come in terms of our ability to assess and to understand, what we have in terms of kids' needs.
The one thing that, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair?
No, I think you still have the floor, Mr. Chair.
Great. The one thing that I might suggest, if the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom haven't seen a report, to black out the student's name or something and be able to provide that report to them. I think that it's being able to see how the school is now able to take a look at the needs of our students. It's just an opportunity for you to take a look at it if anybody's interested. What it's actually producing.
I guess I'd like to see that, with obviously the name blacked out, but it's academic assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It is academic.
And we all know that the social needs of some of these children are
You bet.
okay.
Within the system as well,
Not behavior.
but well,
You know.
Yes, I do. I sure do.
Ms. Whiteside,
It's more than we had before.
Yes.
when you put the mic, just push it away from you. When you push it down, all I'm getting is his typing.
Yeah, but his typing is so fast.
All right, is everyone all set?
Yes.
All right. Well,
Okay. Michael, can we go forward one, please? Thank you. So this is a slide that's, we're starting to get into current level of services in terms of suggestions for the budget. Mathematics, and we're looking at Envisions for grade 5, 6 for software, and Connect Ed for grade 7, 8. And again, the software is absolutely essential in terms of moving towards having kids assessed, and in terms of reaching kids. And again, technology, and I was listening to my 7th graders last night when they did the STEAM Academy, and technology was something that they mentioned repeatedly. And basically it's about engagement with kids, but this is why it's in the budget. This is why we're continuing to ask for money for technology and for software. And so that we're not buying textbooks, and I don't want to get into a debate about textbooks, but I do know that there are places in the middle school, there are closets with textbooks that won't see the light of day. And this is part of a response to that.
Just to be clear, Mr. Tippett, these numbers are not in your budget, is that correct? Or they are?
So these are in the budget.
Yeah.
These are in the budget, thank you.
I actually had a question. Yeah, they are in the budget. I think I see them totaling $9,702 for FY16 budget. They're in there for FY15. What happened in FY14? Why didn't we do anything there?
I'm really not.
I hear you.
Yeah. You know, to be totally candid, Mr. Flaherty, when I looked at the budget, and again, when the superintendent, you know, pointed me in the direction of looking at the budget, I found a number of surprises in terms of things that were not being spent, or in terms of areas that were not being addressed.
Yeah, it's the only year going back to FY12
Right.
that has nothing
but
there.
that's correcting itself.
Okay,
I can
yeah,
promise you.
okay, thank you.
So my understanding was that when they had to make some budget reductions in FY14, that's where they made the reductions.
Yeah, we always have to make budget reductions,
yeah.
but I mean, for some reason, that one took a 0
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that. Yeah, all right.
Which is, you know, then you just have to rectify it, and now you're behind.
Yeah, exactly. So usually it's around, well, usually it's around $8,500. I think FY13, that was when we had the failed override, I believe, and it went down to about $3,700, and now we're back up to $9,700. Like, it's just pay it now and pay it later.
We also, I think part of the thinking was with the town capital investment in technology and textbooks. It didn't actually pay for much software, but the idea was that would offset some of those costs. Okay. Because they were able at that time to invest.
Yeah, I mean, there's really like probably no one in this room that can answer this question because they're all gone, you know. So, but I thought that was interesting, probably as you did, you know.
I did.
Yeah,
I did. And again, the next slide just is talking about, we have carpets in most of the common areas in the building, and I think it's essential that we start to look at replacing those. We've had them cleaned a number of times. You can only clean them so many times. And I'm happy to say that we've finally gotten rid of some of the murals that were in our library that a lot of people just looked at and couldn't really understand why they were there. The art teachers have been awesome about coming up with colors, and we're going to continue to paint the hallways. We have a head custodian now that comes in and starts painting at 5 o'clock in the morning, and almost the entire downstairs has been painted with, again, colors that the art teachers have chosen, and I trust their judgment. I hope the colors in the library are pleasing to everybody that's seen them, but the murals are going to disappear. And again, the idea behind it is to make the building attractive, appealing, and welcoming to kids and adults, but especially the kids.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, go ahead, yes.
When I first saw this and I saw underneath pillars and it was safe and secure schools and it was replace carpets and paint hallways, I chuckled a little bit just because it should be, not safe and secure schools.
Yeah.
And also if I was the town administrator or even the board of selectmen, and I think that they would also like from town hall perspective to look pleasing. So my question is, when it comes to the priorities of creating safe and secure schools, what is your assessment when it comes to, not terrorism, but, the domestic terrorism of our schools and lockdown procedures? Are there any concerns that you have there? Well, this is what's in the budget, not extra.
Right.
So if we were going to switch things out, are there things that have a higher priority than those pieces to be able to put in the budget for this year?
Well, I would say, to go back to safety, I think emotional safety is huge, and in particular for some of our population, in terms of kids that are not coming from situations at home that are welcoming or that are comforting or that are supportive. And the more appealing we can make the building, I think the more we can move towards emotional safety for those kids. So when I think of safety, I don't just think about locks and doors. But in terms of priorities, I mean, we had lockdown procedure last spring that, to my mind, was almost spooky, that I went through wings of the school where you wouldn't have known there was a student in the building. And we know that I've talked to Officer Baptiste about having another lockdown in January, about having dogs come into the middle school. So, we have the luxury of having a building that was most recently renovated in the district, so I think it's safe in terms of structurally safe. But I don't see it as something that we need to add to the budget in order to ensure safety.
For this year?
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
All set?
Yes.
All right.
So I guess we're moving into the minimal services part, and again, and I actually went through and not doing this in a vacuum, but spoke to teachers and spoke to the rest of the admin team about what should we be looking toward, and the things that I heard the most often were Chromebooks and document cameras. And again, to repeat, it's about finding kids where they are in the 21st century. It's about engagement. It's about connecting kids in a classroom to learning without looking back to using consumables and textbooks. And that's why this is being minimal services. Is we are experiencing more motivated kids, more immediate instruction, I believe, with technology, and that's why that line item is there.
What's a Chromebox?
A Chromebox it's a more of a permanent setup for a Chromebook.
Yeah, it's a really nifty little device. It's a box about this big. It's just like a Chromebook, only it's a desktop. It goes on the back of a monitor. You have the same capabilities as a desktop, only it's a box. It's about $195, $200. It does everything a Chromebook would do. What you need to do is attach a keyboard. It can be either attached with cord or wireless, and a monitor, and then we're up and running.
What's a document camera?
A document camera is a device that if I have a piece of paper, I can put it underneath. It will show through my computer, my projector, onto the wall or screen. Yeah,
New version.
Elmo.
Mrs. Vugan, thank you for raising your hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So is it safe to say that the reason why we're taking a look at investing in Chromeboxes is so we can use the existing technology that we have? Meaning that we have monitors, we have keyboards, and that this is a way that we don't have to throw that out. We buy a more expensive piece than a Chromebook and able to hook it on and use existing hardware that we have, not software.
Yes, we can reuse our newer monitors and our keyboards. The other piece is it's also stationary. It charges. We don't have to worry about purchasing a cart to plug in 30-some laptop or Chromebooks to charge. This is just hooked in.
And it's a way to upgrade our technology and still having computer labs without purchasing whole new software. This is, or all new hardware. This is basically a box that's software. Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In the camera system upgrade, we have the luxury of having technology based in the middle school for the district, and I certainly have taken advantage of the fact that these folks are in the building. The entire camera system in the middle school has been reviewed, and we came up with some surprises. There were a number of cameras that were not functioning. We had some cameras that were pointed at brick walls, etc. And part of what I want to do is to replace cameras that are not functioning at all, and then to go from analog to digital for the building. And this goes back to the safety issue. And what I'm told is that if we go to digital, that we could have high definition images of anything that's happening around and outside the school. Unfortunately, sometimes we have incidents. We had vandalism a couple of weeks ago. We spent probably, I would say, about 9 hours trying to, with the help of the resource officer, narrow down and find the kids that made these unfortunate choices. But with the, with the state-of-the-art camera system, we could have cut that time. We could have had the information we needed within minutes. The other thing is that we found out that cameras were not being pointed toward the busiest parts of the building, the main entrance. We didn't have a camera on anything in the main entrance. And a couple of parts of the building where we have the most traffic. And so that's being addressed. But I think that that's something that, to go back to safety, and if something happens between students where there's a question about how we should proceed with an investigation, the cameras are essential.
Mr. Sweat.
Go ahead, Matt. I was just going to add, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Minkle, but $9,000 just fills a couple of some gaps.
Yes.
But we do have a capital proposal to actually change it from an analog to digital, and that's
Yes.
much more expensive.
It is.
Project.
This is just to start the process.
Based on what you said, it sounds like nobody's looking at the output. Because you wouldn't have a camera staring at a brick wall for long if someone was actually looking at the screen that the camera is supposed to be projecting on. So that, unless it's a continuous, unless we're actually recording the output for looking at some later date because an incident occurred, there's no value to having a camera if no one's looking at the output. So whose responsibility is it to look at the output? I'm not suggesting there isn't a cost, but for example, when I go into the high school, which I go into more than the middle school, I see Mrs. Munson with a whole bank
You're always welcome, Jeff.
I know I am, thank you. But I see a whole bank of cameras, and she's looking at them routinely. Who looks at the middle school cameras?
We look at the middle school cameras when it's necessary. The bank of cameras is sitting in a closet inside the main office. It's not accessible to a person.
The screens are inside a closet.
Correct.
So they're sitting unobserved most of the time.
Yes.
I have to think about that. I know there's a cost associated with having someone look at them. But if we could somehow have...
And there's also a time element.
There's a time element, but just glancing up, which is what I know Mrs. Munson does. Every time someone presses to come in the building.
All right, so it's okay that you're like,
And if
fried
she-
donuts.
Oh. If she wants to find someone in the building, she also looks at the cameras and
Sure.
says, I can't see Mr. Palladino roaming around the building. But it sounds like the middle school cameras are in a...
We use walkie-talkies for that.
No, I understand that, but I'm starting to question the location of the screens in a
Okay.
closet.
If I could interject, I
Please.
think what we found last year when Mr. Meikle and I started looking because of the need to look at some of the cameras, we found some of the cameras were not even working, as well as some of the servers. So this is a process that Mr. Meikle has been going through, and I believe that your point's well taken, that we need to look at where the screens are placed, and we may be moving them to a more visual location just to help deter and let kids know that, yes, we are looking.
That would be a great idea.
Oh, yes, Miss Whiteside.
WCTV has PEG, the public, educational, and governmental, can they help you out with your camera needs and your updating?
We actually have WCTV, in our building. At least we have one person. That's a great question. I'll check that out. That's a great
Particularly if
question.
you're going to a new generation of stuff,
Yeah.
because that is part of their contract.
We have a board member shaking his head.
I think he was,
I
that was a
would
no.
move the desk into the closet. That was one of the things.
Mr.
It's a
Sullivan,
very small closet.
It's good.
This is more of a district-wide question, and there's been changes. Now there's Alice out there. Rather than piecemealing this all and having all different systems, wouldn't it make sense to change it district-wide and maybe do it all at once and have a system that everybody's trained on and knows?
I mean, intuitively, I'd say, yeah, but it's always a matter of money, to do it all at once, right? That's why we do everything piecemeal now. I mean, we wouldn't have wireless. We used to take the approach toward the wireless technology, like, well, we got to put that off because we can't afford to do it all. Well, then, someone got the bright idea, let's do a little here, let's do a little there, let's do it, and finally it added up. So yeah, we'd love to do the whole district. Let's do it.
In an opportunity to make Mr. McMillan's life miserable, maybe we should try and get a quote on that. That's what I'm good at, by the way. Yes.
Mrs.
It's
Buchan?
not just Mr. McMillan.
Mrs. Buchan?
So I think it's a very good point to be able to take a look at security, technology, maintenance, all of those pieces and try to find efficiencies behind them, and then being able to work together on how can we get the best quote across the board. So being able to say, out of this meeting, yes, we're going to start that day one tomorrow and try to do that before this budget season, I think would be huge.
I would say I wouldn't expect for this budget season, but what I would say is, we've got the policies of using free cash for capital items. We do have the abilities to borrow. In fact, I think one of the things we should speak about is keeping a borrowing line for our debt service at roughly $1 million, even if it's going to affect all of us, so that we have a minimum that we're borrowing, keeping at that level. And, that's me saying we should spend more money is pretty rare, so.
Yeah, take advantage of it, folks.
Yeah. Long term.
Mr. Titlebaum?
Just
Mr.
in
Titlebaum, go ahead.
Just in regards to that, one of the things that town meeting accomplished in the fall, by retiring, even though it's community preservation money, we are going to save overall money in the town if we keep retiring long-term debts when we have the opportunities and the windows to do so. I think that's set an example for how to do things going forward. Borrow for 20, see if you can get it paid off in 10, and that way you're going to be able to hopefully keep up your $1 million rollovers of borrowing. And, I'm not saying that, this way, I'm not going to sit here as a sole member of the Board of Selectmen and say, guess what, school department, you can borrow $1 million a year and everybody in town is going to think that's the most wonderful thing in the world. But I will say that rather than always looking to the regular budgeting process and looking to grow that number, look to the borrowing a little bit. I think that's really going to stand you in good stead going forward. We don't seem to get a lot of flack about borrowing. We do seem to get a lot of flack about budgets. You guys know the political process.
Well, we don't get a lot of flack about borrowing because that's town meeting. I mean, once you go to a ballot, it's a different story.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But these aren't ballot questions.
Right.
This is, the legislature decides this stuff, and
Gotcha.
it's not a, so long as you can answer the question, can we pay it back, usually the people will go for it, unless it's some outlandish, ridiculous thing that nobody even needs.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think the point to be taken out of this discussion is that when we're taking a look at redoing security systems and redoing, other parts that collectively we both need, how can we do that together and borrow together so then we get the lowest bid possible? and that we're not duplicating services, or to the town administrator's point, that we have multiple systems with all different kinds of training that needs to go along with it, because that's a cost also. So that's the real big point around borrowing, that we need, if we're going to borrow, and it's something collectively that we need across the board, then we need to do that together and make every single effort to do that together.